Kevin Stefanski may not even have to make a decision on who his starting quarterback will be week one because it looks like it's going to be made for him. We'll talk about it coming up on the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer German, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast. I'm proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. Day one of joint practices with the Eagles, and another Browns quarterback is hurt. This time it's Shedeur Sanders, and it looks like the Browns QB decision will be made for head coach Kevin Stefanski. Meanwhile, Wednesday was a work in progress for the Browns offense as a whole, but there is one major reason for encouragement, and the Browns defensive line, yes, it is as advertised. I do want to thank you for being in every day with the Locked On Browns podcast, making us your first listen every single day. Remember, you can find Cleveland Browns content with Locked On Browns every week, Monday through Friday, guaranteed, with bonus content on some weekends as well, and it's totally free to you. Just hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you get your podcasts, and of course at the Locked On Browns YouTube channel, where you can also get involved in the show by sharing your thoughts on anything we discussed today in the comments section. This is your team, so be part of the conversation every single day. And today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Football season is just around the corner. Visit FanDuel, the FanDuel app today to start planning your future bets now. And yes, Shedeur Sanders did essentially sit out practice on Wednesday after sustaining an oblique injury early on in practice. It was a very weird situation, similar to a couple weeks ago when Shedeur didn't practice. And I guess we all should have just assumed he must be hurt because he was throwing during individual stuff, during one-on-one drills with receivers and defensive backs. And then all of a sudden, you got to the first team setting. It was 7-on-7s. It was Kenny Pickett going first. It was Tyler Huntley after him. And then the first 11-on-11s, and it was Joe Flacco. It was Dillon Gabriel, and then it was Tyler Huntley. And we were all sitting there like, where's Shedeur Sanders? And so that basically played out throughout the rest of practice, where Flacco took the majority of the reps with the first team. Dillon Gabriel sprinkled in a little bit with the first team, but took most of his reps with the 2s and the 3s during various 11-on-11 drills against the Eagles defense. And then we got to the end of practice, and Shedeur Sanders hadn't taken a snap during team drills the entire time. We came to find out it was an oblique injury for Shedeur, and as a precaution, they held him out. And so essentially, at this point, the only quarterback who hasn't been hurt during training camp is Joe Flacco. And so it's starting to look more and more like Kevin Stefanski isn't going to have much of a decision to make when it comes to this quarterback situation and this quarterback competition, because Kenny Pickett looks like very much a non-factor right now. And if his goal is to have a quarterback picked by next week, when it's the third preseason game, sort of your final dress rehearsal, if you will, to get you ready for the regular season, he's going to play a lot. You're going to see the ones largely play in that final preseason game against the Rams. And so if that's the goal, Flacco's the only one who really seems like he's in line to do that, whereas Kenny Pickett obviously hasn't been able to do much of anything since the hamstring injury that he suffered. And then Dillon Gabriel's been doing with the hamstring, and they sort of tried to slowly ramp him back up. He got thrown a little bit more today because, again, out of necessity, they wanted to get him out there and get him playing more. And it looked for a while like they were just trying to catch him up for the limited reps that he had missed, I guess, in the last couple practices that they had, and obviously not playing in the game on Friday last week. And so that was initially what I kind of thought until we got the update that Shedeur Sanders had been hurt. And there's always the possibility that this isn't a serious oblique injury, and maybe Shedeur Sanders can get out there sooner rather than later. But I usually these things take some time. And so it sort of sets the stage for the quarterback situation to solve itself. And Flacco is going to be your week one starter, even though I think we all sort of saw that coming. We were reading the tea leaves on that to begin with. But I think now it just kind of becomes even more evident because it's the only choice that really makes any sense. He's the only quarterback who's really been healthy throughout the entirety of camp to this point. I also think what this also does, and Stefanski wouldn't necessarily get into quite yet what his plans are for Saturday's game against the Eagles, but he did mention that obviously if Kenny Pickett and Dillon Gabriel can't go, that Shedeur Sanders, this was before practice, that Shedeur Sanders would be the starter. Well, now it looks like Shedeur Sanders isn't going to really be part of the conversation potentially for Saturday's game at all. And so that means if Pickett's not as well, Now all of a sudden Dillon Gabriel gets sort of thrust into the position where he's going to be your starter, and then Tyler Huntley takes over at some point. So it's kind of the opposite of the reverse of last week, where you just take the other rookie quarterback. Shedeur got his start last week, then it went to Tyler Huntley. Now it's the other rookie quarterback, and Gabriel goes to Tyler Huntley. That's what it certainly looks like is going to be the setup on Saturday. That's assuming that Dillon Gabriel gets through practice tomorrow, and he's totally okay because they are still sort of monitoring that hamstring injury and making sure that they're not doing anything. They're not putting too much stress on him or on it before he really gets a chance to, go out and potentially play on Saturday. And what I thought was interesting was that Stefanski actually admitted that his plan all along was to play each rookie in those first 2 preseason games. The goal was always going to sort of be to split them between the 2 rookies. Like Shedeur's going to get one, Dillon's going to get one. And that was kind of the thought process there. And so now he's kind of had that sort itself out for him as well, where just based on necessity, they had to go with Shedeur last week. And based on necessity this week, it looks like they're going to have to go with Dillon. And so it is just kind of what it is. And we'll see how that kind of works and plays itself out. And then tomorrow with the joint practice and then leading into the weekend. But a lot of things that are sort of just becoming obvious, and without Kevin Stefanski even really having to lift a finger to a degree and have to like really make any hard decisions on the position specifically. It's funny how these things sometimes work out this way. But it's another injury that sort of derails whatever the plan was going to be for this quarterback competition. And frankly, it's disappointing because it seems like by the time we get through that game on Saturday, we'll have a game of Shedeur Sanders to go off of and a game of Dillon Gabriel to go off of. But you won't have a game where they both sort of played and showed you different things and sort of competed with each other in that setting of a preseason game together. And it also takes Shedeur Sanders out of an opportunity to go out and build upon what he showed last week in the preseason, which was a very, very good start. I talked about it on the podcast. Like a lot of stuff that we all thought were signs of a guy trending in the right direction, fixing some things that the team's obviously been emphasizing with him and working on, and that he's getting better. And he looks like an NFL quarterback. And there was reason for so much excitement over the weekend and leading into this week because of how he played. Like maybe he can be the guy. And I understand where all that comes from. Now you're going to get a chance to see what Dillon can do. And we'll compare those games. But it would have been nice to also see Shedeur take another step, right? And get even more reps out there and see if he could improve upon even more things that he was trying to work on this week after that performance. Which, by the way, he wants to do. Because even he said like he left some things on the table last week on Friday that he wanted back. And so this was going to be his chance to sort of do that in another preseason game. And now that kind of is likely off the table for him. We'll see what the situation brings tomorrow. We'll see if Sanders' injury is more serious, if it's something that's going to keep him out for Saturday. I'm sort of anticipating that right now. But I think it's kind of twofold here. That Stefanski's decision for Saturday, much like last week's quarterback situation, everyone was freaking out about, are they setting Shedeur up for failure last week? And it was like, guys, they don't have a lot of other quarterbacks right now. They weren't going to play Joe Flacco. Shedeur was the only other healthy quarterback, and so they had to bring Tyler Huntley in to sort of help the situation as well to get through the preseason. And so the same thing kind of applies this week, where now it's the other rookie who's likely going to get a shot. But then also, it is abundantly clear at this point, if it wasn't already just based off the rep share, that Joe Flacco is more than likely going to be the starting quarterback, barring something crazy week 1 of the season, because he's taken the majority of those reps. He's kind of tuning himself up into getting ready for the regular season. Kenny Pickett's a non-factor right now. He's still limited and only participating in 7-on-7s. And so it's unfortunate that it sort of sorted itself out this way and that injuries had to play a role in it. But Flacco sort of by default is your starting quarterback. And so I think that sort of became more clear today with the news on Shedeur Sanders. And we'll see what Thursday brings in terms of a joint practice, if there's any updates on those guys. Quarterbacks aside for a little bit here, granted they are part of this, the offense as a whole is a work in progress. But it does look night and day this year to last year. We'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions, so whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week 1 even kicks off, this moment is for you. Maybe you've got a gut feeling on who's going to win the MVP. I kind of am feeling Joe Burrow, honestly. After the season you had last year, nearly dragging Cincinnati to the playoffs, maybe he gets him over the hump this year. Speaking of the playoffs, is this finally the year Buffalo comes through in the AFC, or can anyone even beat the Eagles? Is it just their championship to lose? Place a futures bet on your favorite to win the Super Bowl. Visit the FanDuel app and start planning your future bets now, because FanDuel Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. All right, so I think in general, first of all, I want to be clear, because I think it's hard in these settings of joint practices to walk away and be like, well, this team won the day and this team lost the day. There's certain instances where that becomes pretty obvious. I think last year, for example, and I'm going to this actually leads nicely into the conversation I want to have. I think last year was pretty obvious that the Vikings largely won those joint practices between the two teams in Berea last year. And a lot of that just had to do with the offense really couldn't get off the ground. Like, nothing they were doing was working. It was a miserable experience for all. And so I do think there's something to be said for sometimes, like, sometimes you see, like, the obvious that a team had a better day than the other. But I think in the settings we saw today in Philly, it was a lot. There was some good, there was some bad for both teams. Like, on one field, Jalen Hurts threw 2 picks. We'll get to that here coming up. On the other field, the Browns offense, like, they didn't have any turnovers, but they also weren't, like, moving the ball immensely well. Their run game was still sort of stuck in the mud at times. They really couldn't run up the middle. At Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis, and rightfully so, those two guys are amazing. But what I thought was interesting was, like, listen, it's okay this time of year right now to still feel like there's progress being made, and that the offense is still sort of figuring some things out, and that it's not perfect yet. And Joe Flacco gave some credence to this after practice, just talking about, like, how they can get better. And they always go back and watch the tape and sort of say, like, okay, here's some things that we can improve on. Here's how we can attack this differently. And maybe we'll see even some of that tomorrow, and the offense will look even better. But I don't think, like, it has to be this, like, end all be all of, like, well, the offense was just terrible today. There there was a mix. It was not great. It was not terrible. And you saw some good moments. You saw some moments where it was like, okay, they have some things to work on. The most important thing, though, that I can gather from, like, a joint practice setting like we got today versus last year is that this team is night and day different offensively than they were a year ago. And what I mean by that is, like, many of you remember the updates from a year ago when they had the joint practice with the Vikings. It was a lot of pre-snap penalties, couldn't do anything, couldn't move the ball. Throws were dirted by Deshaun Watson. Guys not running the right routes. Illegal motion or illegal procedure before the ball was even snapped. They could barely even do anything with the football. They could barely even get the offense off the ground. They could barely run plays like a competent NFL offense. Like, it was a circus. It was a circus out there. It really was. Like, Barnum and Bailey's was in town. It was embarrassing. And I think this year, that's not the case. You are seeing them. There was not a lot of penalties today. There were some on the back end. I think Deontay Johnson got called for, like, a push-off on one. I think there was a DPI on a play. Like, but most of the stuff that was getting called for or flagged, it was, like, secondary level stuff. It wasn't near the line of scrimmage. And so the offense was running plays. They were actually getting work done. Like, last year, it didn't feel like they were getting any work done because the offense couldn't do anything. Like I said, it was brutal. And so to see them actually functioning and getting work in and improving and running plays that they can then go back and dissect and pick apart and decide this is good, this is bad, that in of itself is a major difference between last year and this year, and something that should give Browns fans encouragement that it's not going to be another 3-14 season. Because I've been saying all along, if the offense is competent, if the offense can just function like a normal NFL offense, well, you're setting yourself up to, I'm not saying it's going to be a magical playoff season or anything like that, but you're setting yourself up to certainly be better than last year and improve upon what was one of the worst seasons in recent memory for this franchise. And so we have to see how that all kind of comes together throughout the rest of camp. But comparing last year's joint practice setting to this year's joint practice setting, like I said, night and day in terms of the work that they're getting done, how the offense is functioning, how they're sort of going about things, how they're able to actually get in some good quality work. I think that's huge for where the tone they're trying to set as they count down and get ready for the start of the season here. The other thing, and I mentioned it a little bit, like the pre-snap motion. Last year, there were so many questions asked to Ken Dorsey, to Kevin Stefanski about the use of pre-snap motion and how much they were going to incorporate that into the offense last year. Well, it didn't really happen. And I kind of wondered if part of the reason it didn't was because there was so much wrong in the preseason and training camp where they couldn't even get the offense to start plays, that they just kind of decided, all right, this is too much. We just need to get these plays going. We're not going to worry about all the pre-snap stuff. And so they ended up not running a lot of pre-snap motion and it's like, to me, in today's NFL, if you're not utilizing pre-snap motion, you've already lost, because it is such a valuable tool for diagnosing things on the defensive side, figuring out what formations or what coverages they're in. That stuff all matters. And the fact that they weren't using it enough and it didn't really become a tool for them last year was a disaster. This year, they're using it, and they're using it appropriately, and they're not getting the penalties, and it just feels like a more well-oiled machine. I'm not saying it's a perfectly well-oiled machine. I'm not saying that they're going to light it up, but it's good to see and refreshing to see that they are leaning into the pre-snap motion, and they're actually able to do it in an efficient way where it's not penalty here, bad play there, wrong route there, or a guy doesn't know what he's doing on a play. Like there's far less confusion than there was a year ago. And I'm chalking a lot of that up to you're getting back to Stefanski's offense, the base of what he wants to do, and everybody seems to enjoy that system. But man, it's been a breath of fresh air, and it's been refreshing to see how that group has sort of functioned, how they've gone about things. And again, I get it. Like there's still room for improvement. There's room for improvement, I think, with individual players. There's certainly room for improvement on the offensive side of the ball, just in general. But comparing to last year in this same type of setting where you're getting competitive reps in against another team, it looks more like an NFL practice. And Joe Flacco, I mentioned what he said earlier, he also gave credence to that, where he was like, today felt like an old school NFL practice, like just two teams going at it, both teams winning in spots, both teams losing in spots. That's the type of thing you want in a joint setting practice. If you can walk away and say like no team won and no team lost, or it was too close to call, or it was just really competitive, I feel like that means you got a good day of practice to sort of watch. Yeah, I think you'd like for your team to win, of course, if you're a fan of the Browns, or on the flip side, if you're a fan of the Eagles. But I think today was just like a lot of good quality work, and it's clear that things are going better for the offensive side of the ball, specifically with the Browns, than they did a year ago. And I think that's setting the stage for what is bound to be a more productive just offense in general in 2025. No need to worry about the Browns' defensive line. They are as advertised. We'll talk about it coming up on the Locked On Browns podcast. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. It's the best time of year. NFL kickoff is almost here, and that means fantasy football season is back in full swing. And this year, Yahoo Fantasy is turning things up with a fantasy football experience like never before. My most competitive fantasy league is on Yahoo Fantasy. It's the most fun I have playing fantasy football. Good friends, a lot of smack talk. And so as much as we're enjoying Yahoo Fantasy, you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days throughout the month of August. To kick it off, they just dropped their Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues, a killer new way to play fantasy football on Yahoo, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated each week until there's only one team left standing. With the season around the corner, now is the time to get a league together and give this new mode a try. Or if you're more into the classics, that's cool too. You can still play head-to-head in private leagues or join a public league. Stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. All right, so we talked about the offense. We talked about the quarterback situation and the craziness of all these injuries and how it's kind of just figuring itself out because of those. I want to go to the other side of the ball and show some love to the defense, because I thought the defense, if we're talking about like winning and losing between these two teams, the Eagles and the Browns, I think the Browns defense won. I think you could probably argue the Eagles defense won. Like maybe just in general, the defenses won the day. But the Browns defense looked awesome. And particularly the defensive line up front was as advertised, as I sort of teased here a couple times. I've talked about it. Like, I think that unit is the heartbeat of this team. Yes, on the defensive side of the ball, but also just in general for the team. Like, that is the strongest unit, deepest unit, in my opinion. They bring a lot to the table. And I thought they dominated as much as they could against what is everyone here touts the Eagles' offensive line as the best in football. I think nationally that's a fair assessment to say as well. Like, I think a lot of people would agree with that statement, that it is the best offensive line in football. They might have the best defensive line in football too, for whatever it's worth. And I thought the Browns' offensive line sort of held their own against that group too, despite still some struggles with the run game getting going. But back to the defensive side, it was relentless all day. Miles was getting in and making plays and would have had some sacks. It felt like Mason Graham, who I was really paying attention to, because let's face it, like, this is Mason Graham, your number 5 overall pick, rookie, going now against the defending Super Bowl champions, a team that, like I said, has arguably the best offensive line in football. And I understand, Eagles dealing obviously with some injuries of their own, and most notably up front in the trenches with their star guard Landon Dickerson. Like, they're missing a guy, but I thought even despite that, like, their offensive line is still really good, still dominant, still the best, if not one of the best in football, as he works through his MCL issue. And Mason was still like pushing the pocket. He was still generating some pressure. There was a couple times where he got pushed back, but I think for a rookie, like, you're still sort of learning some of those nuances. You're learning how to attack, and he's only going to get better at that. But I thought he looked good. Alex Wright a couple times got some pressure. Isaiah McGuire and Alex Wright sort of combined off the other side, were combining and doing some nice things. There was one play I remember where Isaiah McGuire got a little bit too far upfield and gave away the outside contain, and Jalen Hurts was able to sort of sprint past him and against a quarterback like that makes it tough. But something Denzel Ward mentioned after practice is like, hey, you get a rep against that quarterback. We go against Lamar Jackson 2 times a year. Like, it gives you a good look at like, hey, here's what a mobile quarterback can do if you're not careful and if you're not, mindful of, how far upfield you get. So that stuff helps. And he also, Denzel, talked a lot about just how the symbiotic relationship between the D-line and the secondary and how they sort of feed off each other and one sort of leads to the other. We saw that play out because there was a moment in practice later on in 11-on-11s where you had the pressure bearing down on Jalen Hurts, and he threw a ball that was intercepted by Ronnie Hickman because of it. Like, the pressure generated the interception. And as we've talked about this team trying to be better about taking the ball away, it starts up front in the trenches. It starts with the defensive line being able to force quarterbacks into bad throws, not giving the opposing quarterback a lot of time in the pocket to stand back there and throw the football. And if you do that, if you take that away, then the secondary has an easier time because they don't have to cover quite as long. And then they have better opportunities to just intercept the ball in general and make plays in the ball, break it up, whatever it might be. And so, yes, like it was great to see a unit that we've talked so much about and how important that unit's going to be, hold true to who they are and give you what you were hoping, which was a dominant effort, a dominant performance against another team and against, frankly, the defending Super Bowl champions and the best offensive line in football. That was good. And in many respects, like a win on that side of the ball, just in general, because of how good that group was today. And it showed up in the practice out here in Philly. Beyond that, though, like, during 7-on-7s, Devin Bush made an awesome play to pick off Jalen Hurts as well. It was like a slant pattern, read it perfectly, followed his eyes, cut underneath it, picked it off. It might have been a situation in a game where it's like a pick six. Again, it's 7-on-7, so you didn't have like a full team out there to try to chase after him or whatever. But it was a great play. And so, like, I just thought in general that unit was seeing things very well today. I thought, I'll say this too, since we're talking defense, the secondary, what I find interesting about the secondary is there's still some things to work out there. I don't know if they're missing Martin Emerson. Greg Newsome not involved in team stuff today because he's still dealing with that shoulder issue. And so that lingers on here. And so because of that, you've seen some of these young guys getting, opportunities. Cameron Mitchell was on the outside a lot, playing outside corner opposite of Denzel Ward quite a bit. You saw, because you don't have Greg Newsome outside and because Martin Emerson's hurt, you saw a lot of the three safety looks with one of the safeties playing that nickel spot, which is going to be interesting to see like how they handle that roster-wise. Do they keep an extra safety? Do they keep the 6 defensive backs, or do they take a defensive back away or a cornerback away to keep an extra safety? So we'll see what that all looks like. But like there's moments where, like Cameron Mitchell, for example, has had a very up and down camp. He's made some plays, but then there's also been times where he just gets beat in coverage. But what I think is, and I like today, for example, the one guy that this Browns defense could not cover was Dallas Goedert. I want to pay more attention to that tomorrow because I want to see, like, is Carson Schlesinger the guy, guarding or stepping out on a tight end in the slot or something like that? Like, how are they trying to cover the tight end spot? Because it did not go well today. And if they change some things up, like how they sort of handle that. But even beyond that, like, some guys are getting beat. It's just it hasn't been totally pretty. The defensive line has kind of masked some of those problems. But what I do think is interesting is they're getting in and like they're getting in late. If they get beat on a play, they'll try to get back into it as quickly as possible, and they'll try to rip the ball away or get their hand in to try to break it up. Denzel Ward did a great job of that on sort of a one-on-one matchup with Devontae Smith, where ball goes up to the corner of the end zone, and Devontae Smith was past him, but he got back into the play and went up right at the last second and saw him going for the ball. He made a play on the ball and completely just knocked it out of being a catch, like out of his hands. It was great. And so you're seeing a lot of that, like the late hands from the receivers, and then they're responding to that with late hands of their own to make sure, okay, ball's here, now I'm getting it out, or now I'm knocking it down. So I think that's been the one bonus, or the biggest positive for the secondary, is that they are making those plays. They are very active with their hands, and you're seeing some good plays come of that. But yeah, still some things I think to work out in the secondary. And like I said, day 2, I will be paying close attention to how they start to cover Dallas Goedert, because he was a problem today for them in coverage just in general. And Jalen took advantage of it. Jalen Hurts took advantage of it. So, all right, that's day 1 of the joint practices with the Eagles in the books. That's another episode of the Locked On Browns podcast for you in the books. Thank you for joining me as always to talk about your favorite football team. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make Locked On Browns your first listen every day. For your second listen, check out Locked On Bets, where betting experts Lee Sterling and Kevin Rogers have MLB locks and can't miss football futures. Or you can keep it local. Check out Locked On Cavs or Locked On Guardians. Thank you for being an everydayer at the Locked On Podcast Network. I will talk to you again real soon, Cleveland. Tomorrow, actually, after another day of joint practice with the Eagles. See ya.